Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Chrono Trigger. This is my series where I play Chrono Trigger. I read a newsletter called Astrolabe. You can see the link right up there, aiden.substack.com. And a big part of what I write about in my newsletter is retro video games, specifically retro, like old school 16-bit Japanese RPGs. Chrono Trigger, like many people, Chrono Trigger is my favorite game, my favorite Japanese RPG, my favorite game, and I'm really excited to be able to play it on stream with so many other people. I've played this game a million times. I know it quite well, and so today and for this whole series, I'm doing just like a new game plus playthrough. So I have like maxed out, leveled up characters, so we can kind of just rush through the game fairly quickly, see the story, explore the world, and have some fun talking about the history of the game. Last year I wrote a piece on Medium called Timeless, A History of Chrono Trigger. I'm going to put a link in the chat so you can read that if you haven't already. It's a big, long, deep dive into this game, its history, and the history of the people who made it. Chrono Trigger is quite notable for its kind of all-star cast of creators, including the creator of Final Fantasy, the creator of Dragon Quest. They all got together and worked on this, and it's kind of a culmination of what kind of made 16-bit and 8-bit Japanese RPGs so great. It took that style and just perfected it, and that's one of the things I love about it so much. In terms of this playthrough, we're about halfway through, I would say. If you're familiar with the game, I've just got the time machine, the Epic. Traveled back to 12,000 BC, and I'm about to tackle Mount Woe. After this, I'm going to get back to the Kingdom of Zeal, and the Ocean Palace will rise from the depths, and, well, won't rise yet, but we'll go down to the Ocean Palace, which kind of marks the mid point of the game. It's home to the game's big twist as well, and then that kicks off the back half of the game, which is sort of this. It's almost like an open world subquest themed section of the game, similar to Final Fantasy VI's second half, World of Ruin. And so once we get there, we'll have a whole bunch of different subquests to tackle, and that's going to be fun. But for now, we're sort of in the linear, story-driven part of the game. Chrono and his team have been traveling back and forth through time, looking, first on an adventure, and then they find out that a kind of intergalactic parasite bioweapon called Lavos arrived on this planet 65 million years ago. And in the year 1999 AD, Lavos sort of erupts from the ground, has sucked everything it can from this planet, destroys the planet in the process, and then blasts off into space. So Chrono and his team are trying to stop that from happening, and so they're bouncing around through time. At this point, we're trying to get back to the Kingdom of Zeal, which is sort of a hyper sophisticated society of magic users that existed far back in the past, and they're working on something called the Ocean Palace. Their queen is working on something called the Ocean Palace, which is meant to harness the power of Lavos, and it sort of makes her go a little cuckoo. And so we're trying to get back there so we can stop that from happening. Right now we're on the Kingdom of Zeal, which I was just talking about, is up in the sky. It floats on these cool islands. Right now we're down on the kind of main ground level, where it's sort of like an ice age, and this is where all the people who don't have magic live, and so they're called the Earthbound ones, and they're sort of subjugated by the people in Zeal. Chrono Trigger is split up into several different eras. So you have kind of 1000 AD, that's sort of the modern era. That's where Chrono and Luca and Marl, my team members here, are from. You have you going back into the past, you have 600 AD, which is sort of like a medieval epic fantasy world. You have 12,000 AD, which is where we are now. You have 65 million years ago, which is sort of like cave people and dinosaurs. And as you go through the game, and there's also 2300 AD, which is far in like a post-apocalyptic future. As you go through the game, you kind of bounce around between all of these various eras, completing tasks, chasing down Lavos, meeting a whole bunch of different characters, and recruiting party members, and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of when it comes down to it, each era in the world is not really much different than, say, the way that other Japanese RPGs just have different continents, or they have different worlds, or like areas that you can go to and bounce around. But it's presented in kind of an interesting narrative way that kind of makes it unique in the genre, and still unique even today. There's some other games that have kind of pursued time travel as a narrative mechanic, but none that do it quite the same way Chrono Trigger does. So we're on Mount Woe, which is one of the kind of mid-game dungeons. You'll have noticed as I'm running around, there are some they look like boulders. Not the little gray ones we can see on the screen right now, but sort of larger ones. They look like boulder enemies. And during new or regular playthroughs, they're very important because they have a lot of AP, which helps you learn new skills. You can see one right there near the top of the screen. They're hard to defeat because they run away quickly and you can only use your regular attacks. Oh, I'll show you. You can't use any of your techs, so you kind of have to rely on, hopefully getting in a critical hit or so before they run away. But if you manage to, they give you a lot of AP, and it's a good way to grind up your magic techs. And as you can see, even like with my souped up characters, their super high evade skill means that it's just hard to hit them. But in a playthrough like this, where I already have maxed out characters, I'm not going to bother fighting them. I would say that Chrono Trigger's it's not a hard game. It's not an easy game. Kind of falls in the middle if it's your first time through. There are a few difficulty spikes. One of them is early on when you're in the future and you're trying to kind of get food for the people in the post-apocalyptic future. You run into this big robot, and up to that point, you've sort of been able to muddle your way through battles. If you're not paying attention, that battle can mess you up pretty quick. And then the next difficulty spike, I would say, is the boss here in this dungeon called Giga Gaia. And he kind of comes out of nowhere and can wipe the floor with you pretty quickly and pretty easily if you're not careful. So as I've said, I've played Chrono Trigger a lot. I'm very familiar with the game. I'm not, however, a speedrunner. And sometimes I get lost, even after having beaten the games, dozens of times. I still get lost here and there. Hey Ben, how's it going? Yeah, I expect that initial difficulty spike in the post-apocalyptic world, 2300 AD. I expect it got a lot of first-time players. It's a big jump up. Like, even going through, there's like ruins of old cities and stuff filled with like mutants and enemies that are kind of, they hit harder and they're just tougher. They require a bit more strategy, and it can be even for me when I'm playing through on a fresh playthrough, even with all my experience, I still find that part of the game to be a bit of a slog, because you can't really rely on just being able to muddle through very quickly through the battles. You start to power up quite a bit after that, and it becomes a little easier. Okay. So I can use all of my like high-end magic spells. Flare does a ton of damage. Chrono Trigger has ran various enemies though that kind of have 2 stages, or like you could see those enemies. There were the imps being carried by those birds, and you have to kind of knock them down first before you can defeat them. So that adds a little bit of extra time onto some of the battles here. You'll also see that I'm mostly just using my physical attacks in these battles. Marl and Luca don't do a ton of damage. Chrono does. I think I have the Wonder Shot on Luca. Let me see. And yeah, the Wonder Shot, and it just does random damage. Maybe based on the time counter, how long you've played. I can't, or the last digit of the time counter, but I can't remember if that's actually true or if I'm just making that up. These enemies, there's all, if you go, you can look around the web and find like forum threads or Twitter threads about like 16-bit sprites that you kind of misinterpreted as a kid, and I always saw these as sort of like funny little birds with their hands up in the air. Until only probably a couple of years ago when I realized they're plants that don't look at anything at all like the way I was picturing them in my head. I always kind of saw them as funny little weird duck things. So there's another one of those rubbles. In a regular playthrough, you want to try to defeat them as consistently as possible. You get one shot at each of them, and they're done. They don't come back. They don't respawn. Even if you save and quit, even if you exit the dungeon before completing it. So you have kind of one shot. That's it. We're near the end here of Mount Woe. I've always thought Mount Woe is pretty cool. It's another example of Chrono Trigger having just a lot of variety in its dungeons. I found that a lot of more contemporary Japanese RPGs, like I just bought Bravely Default 2 on the Switch. I was playing a bit of Octopath Traveler recently, and I find that often the dungeons are just sort of like, they're all the same. They might have a different tile set, they might have a different look, different kind of environment design, but like they're all just sort of pathways that you kind of cut through, little mazes. Whereas in Chrono Trigger, I appreciate that they have like linearity, or sorry, not linearity, like variety in the height, being able to go across those different chains to get to different areas on Mount Woe. Like it takes into account the fact that this is a floating island kind of tethered to the ground by these huge chains, and the way that you have to navigate the dungeon is different than, say, the cathedral at the beginning of the game, or the mountains where you find the Masamune sword. And I think that's one of the strengths of Chrono Trigger. Like if somebody was to come and ask me what makes Chrono Trigger great, I could give them a lot of reasons, and I did, if you go read Timeless, A History of Chrono Trigger. But one of the major ones, I would say, is the way that it just really kind of instills a lot of variety into the various dungeons. There we go, Giga Gaia, down. Giga Gaia has 3 parts, a lot of powerful spells. Again, first time through, or if you're on a clean save file, so you're a much lower level, Giga Gaia can be a big challenge. But he's also one of my favorite bosses. I love this battle screen. Like Chrono Trigger, of course, you fight most battles just on the world map, but I love how they kind of have this forced perspective for this Giga Gaia battle. It's cool looking. And so this is the guru, Melchior, who we have met in 1000 AD, so he was at the Millennial Fair right at the beginning of the game. This version of Melchior has not ever met us. So we know him, he doesn't know us. We're about to find out why at the end of the Ocean Palace. So he's concerned about the Ocean Palace. The gurus kind of have caught on to the fact that Queen Lean's plans for the planet and harnessing Lavos' energy is probably not a good one. And they kind of paid the price for trying to oppose her. So her spirit has been stolen by the immortal Lavos. I don't think that's like literal. I don't think Lavos controls her, but I think she sort of represents, absolute power corrupting absolutely. I think she's just enthralled by the idea of having Lavos's power to herself, and so I think that it's sort of psychological, rather than like Lavos doesn't show any proclivity towards mind controlling anybody. So Mount Woe just crashed into the ocean, and that's not good. Not good for the Earthbound ones, but it's good for us. So Lavos sleeps deep underground, consuming the energy of the planet. Then if the Mammon machine is brought closer to him, he may awaken. And so that would be a big concern. So now we must get into the Ocean Palace, and the person who's going to help us with that is Shala, who is my favorite character in the game. She was sort of the first video game character that I really connected with and idolized when I first played through, and she's always kind of held up as just a pivotal character in Chrono Trigger for the way that she is kind of proactively pushing against her mother, who's the queen. You can see her little brother there too, who obviously plays a huge role in the game, but under a different guise as an adult. Yeah, so Shala kind of sees that there's no difference between the Earthbound ones and the Magic Kingdom in the sky, except that the Magic Kingdom of Zeal has sort of come under the thrall of chasing power and harnessing Lavos' power. And she recognizes that humanity needs to bind together to be able to survive. All right. So this is Dalton. He's Queen Lean's sort of muscle, her right hand man. He's sort of a comic relief character, but also not. I do kind of find him to be an odd character. Sometimes he's very strong, and then other times he sort of plays the comic relief role. And so I've never really been able to figure out what I think of Dalton. Okay, so they need Shala to be able to activate the Mammon machine. And so now they need to get her back. Yeah, you remember hating Dalton the most of anyone. Yeah, Dalton, I think, is the one that just kind of... He does fit that role of just kind of maniacal bad guy, right? He's just sort of needlessly and senselessly and, linearly cruel all the time. If he could cackle, he would. And I think that kind of raises a lot of dislike in a lot of players for him. There's a fan sequel to Chrono Trigger called Crimson Echoes, and I haven't played all of it. I did play on stream a few months ago, the first hour or so, but my understanding is he plays a fairly large role in that game. So the Skyways are open again, thanks to Shala, and so the Skyways are what we can use to get from the kind of ground level where the Earthbound ones live up into the kingdom in the sky, Kingdom of Zeal. And so that's where we're going. And yeah, so he's going to give us a red dagger made from the red stone that the Mammon machine is made from. Astute players can kind of connect the dots to recognize that we went and retrieved a red stone from 65 million BC that was used to repair the Masamune. And so that's sort of a little hint of what's to come. No, I want to sleep. I'll just use a shelter. Okay, so I need to go to the Skyway. I've always liked how just like relentless the environment is in 12,000 BC. Here, you know, like in the Earthbound Kingdom, just that relentless drive of the wind. There's no music or anything, because it's super effective when you get up through the Skyway and reach the Kingdom of Zeal for the first time, and you get like this beautiful, idyllic world. And what I mean, in my opinion, is the best music, best map music in the game. Like, I just love the Kingdom of Zeal theme. And so you're kind of hit over the head with the fact that, like, oh, this is like the divide between the wealthy people in the Kingdom of Zeal and the Earthbound ones is just so huge. And it, you know, it seems and feels idyllic when you get up into Zeal for the first time. But then you kind of start to recognize fairly quickly that Zeal is actually, you know, like the corrupt kingdom that is, you know, subjugating the rest of the people. This is not the place. Wait, yes. So earlier in the game, in my last stream, I learned a secret technique. Oh, I didn't talk to the new. Oh, wait. What's happening? I didn't talk to the new. Never mind. You can learn a technique to scratch a news back and come back to this town of Kajar and scratch that news back, and it'll give you a speed tab and stuff. But I guess I didn't do that this time around. Normally, I would go after all the speed tabs, but when you have kind of maxed out characters, there's not really much point. I really love the way that like they implement verticality into this 2D map. And again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about Mount Woe. Like, you know, Zeal is up in the sky, and they use the cool Mode 7 effect to show the sky and the horizon, the curve of the horizon. But they also implement, like, you know, where all the other maps are, you know, these flat plains that you're moving along. They kind of use, again, a forced perspective to make this look kind of more 3D, and then use verticality through all of these, like, caves with the teleportation portals to give this, you know, even stronger sense of, like, climbing up and up and up. This isn't where I need to go. This is where I need to go. Yes, Zeal is just straight up cool, right? Like, there's so many things that stand out about Chrono Trigger. I think the like number one memory that I have of Chrono Trigger is I got it for my birthday just before Christmas. And I played through it for a while and finally beat it after a long time, and then went on to start a New Game Plus playthrough immediately. And it took me 2 weeks on my first playthrough to get to Zeal. I remember like running to my mom 2 days after starting my New Game Plus playthrough, and like just so proudly telling her how the first time it took me two weeks to get to Zeal, and this time I got there in 2 days, and just being like so immensely proud of that. And so Zeal has always kind of like just been like a point in the game where I kind of feel like it really starts coming to a head, and it signifies like the fact that like you're really in it, and like it just looks cool, right? Like it's just so unique against anything else in the game or anything else in the genre at the time. The mix of like high-end sci-fi with magical elements is just so interesting. Like Final Fantasy started going like way further into that, especially starting with 7 and 8. But like the way Chrono Trigger and Zeal kind of mashed those two genres together was just seemed significant at the time. And so reaching Zeal in 2 days, reaching this point in the game where like, the first big twist happens and the game's whole like lore and narrative kind of comes to is revealed, just is something that really sticks with me. And I'm sure my mom was very proud of me also. So in the Ocean Palace, you do want to have you have to have Luca. You probably also want to have Frog or Marl, because there are these floating imp, or what are they called, scouters, and depending on their color, they're impervious to certain elemental attacks. So you can see I used Flare there, and it just healed them. And so you want to have a spell of each element to be able to damage them. I can't remember off the top of my head if Robo's shadow damage will hurt them or not. It might. In a large, like, in a New Game Plus playthrough like this, I can cheese my way through by just using physical attacks, and it's fine. But you generally do want to try to have the correct elemental spells so that you can get through the battles a little more quickly. This whole dungeon is just so cool. Also, it's huge. Chrono Trigger generally has fairly small dungeons, I would say, but the Ocean Palace is just gigantic. The glowing effect in the ground is just beautiful. It's kind of hard to get the full impact of it on an LCD screen. Like you're watching through, the stream on your computer monitor, and it looks good. And the scanline shader that I use is great, but it doesn't quite, and it can't quite match just the splendor of a really good phosphor glow on a CRT monitor. And the Ocean Palace is just full of those effects that just really, really push what a CRT TV or monitor can do for games over and above what you can get from an LCD or an LED or whatever. These Jinn and Barghast are also kind of obnoxious on a first playthrough because you have to I can never remember which it is. One of them, the Barghast, protects the Jinn with a shield, so then you have to kind of strategically take one out, then the other. I also think the Ocean Palace really stretches the soundtrack to its limits. Every time frame, every time era has its its own feel to the music, and the composer Yasunori Mitsuda is has done a famously good job on the soundtrack, but the kind of etherealness, the just the musicality of it, the instrumentation of the music here in the Ocean Palace is just so different than anything else in the game to this point. And it kind of to me, it kind of evokes this idea of otherworldliness and the future and just, I don't know, it brings together the feeling and the tone of the Ocean Palace in a similar way to the graphics. And that's always impressed me. There's a lot of unavoidable fights in the Ocean Palace, so even on a New Game Plus playthrough, it can take a while. You know, maybe there are a bunch of skips that I am just not familiar with that could kind of speed things up. But I've always found that it's just a pretty slow battle. I don't need to do this, but this is one of my favorite secrets in the game. You get to run all the way around this way and then sloop into this little where is it? There it is. Secret area, and you get a demon hit. This is going to be something that you're often going to put on Frog, the character Frog, if you have him. He's kind of interesting because he has a lot of different or he doesn't have very many different weapons. You get the Masamune for him, which you're going to use for a long time in the game. The demon hit's probably the first one that will replace the Masamune in terms of power, and then you just power up the Masamune again later on, and that's what he uses through the end of the game. So this is an instance, so you can see now I have a blue and a red one of these, you know, little flying, little flying things, and I can't use area of effect spells to take them all out at the same time. So now I'm kind of left doing single target spells to take them out one at a time, which is again why like it is helpful to have Luca, Chrono, and then Marl or Frog, so you have all three of the major elements taken care of. Never really like thought about this room. I guess you can come back. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if this is a like just an emulation glitch, but you can see. I think the little I think that's the point on which you would press the button for the elevator. You can see it kind of glowing over on the left side of the screen. I guess you go back up that elevator at some point, and that takes you back to the top. I've never really gone in that room before, or paid attention to it at any rate. One of the most useful items on a New Game Plus playthrough are the gold studs that allow your characters to cast their spells for just 25% of the regular MP cost, because a whole lot of the playthrough just revolves around just spamming your strongest spells over and over. You need a lot of MP for that. What I don't use a lot on New Game Plus playthroughs are the dual and triple techs, which make Chrono Trigger unique. Your party members can combine their magic skills to do new like magic attacks. And one of the things that I actually think is interesting about Chrono Trigger is that there are, you know, a lot of the time the dual and triple techs are worth it. In other games where you can kind of combine character attacks, you're often better off just having them attack separately because the high-end damage output is better. But Chrono Trigger is balanced in a way that like it's often worthwhile. Like the opportunity cost of missing out on 2 or 3 other character actions is high enough that it's worth doing. That was weird, a little emulation glitch, I guess. Just kind of locked up there for a sec. But here we go. I know watching speedruns, you'll find they use Isla and Chrono's Falcon hit dual tech a lot because of the type of damage it does and the multipliers on it. It's just one of the most efficient, like time efficient and MP efficient moves in the game for dealing a lot of damage and getting through battles, especially boss battles, quickly and efficiently. So here we are. We have a ceremony kind of trying to awaken the Mammon Machine, awaken Lavos, harness all of that power that Lavos has. Shala has been forced into this role. Yeah, you didn't use Isla much as a kid. She's possibly the strongest character in the game in terms of just like a straight up like damage dealing potential. I've played through the game at this point pretty much with every party combination, and when I want to have like just a really efficient, quick playthrough, I'll often use Isla. Because she can deal so much damage so fast. And her triple tech with Marl... No, who is it? No, it's Robo, Magus, and... Isla or Marl? I can't remember. One of those triple techs is really good as well. I can't remember if it uses Isla, so... Not really very useful to this conversation, but... where'd my shelters go? Can't use this. But one of the things about Isla as well is she has no weapons to equip in the game, and I've mentioned this on previous streams. She has no weapons to equip, but as she reaches certain level thresholds, her fist powers up. And at max level, which is what I'm at now, she gets a bronze fist. And with the bronze fist, every critical hit she does is guaranteed max damage, so 9,999 damage, even against bosses. And so you can like really do some serious damage if you focus on, trying to improve her ability to do critical hits. That one's not as useful, obviously, on regular playthroughs because you're never going to get that high. I don't think I usually even get her or her first upgrade to her fist on regular playthroughs. But oh shoot, I just used fire, which is the one spell I don't want to use. Yeah, so if you do play through this game again, try giving Isla a shot. Watch some speedruns and see what they do with the characters. And I was surprised by how many techs that I almost never use actually come in really handy if you're trying to kind of maximize efficiency. The worst thing about these scouts and scouters is that every time you use an AoE attack, they respond with their own. So I just hit 4 of them with fire, meaning we then had to watch 4 AoE attacks in response. And now I'm going to get 2 lightning attacks from trying to take out the gold ones with water damage. Probably didn't need to use Luminaire there. I could have gone with Lightning too, but I do know I'm going to get a chance to heal up my MP before the end of this dungeon. The always fun elevator section. I believe there's a kind of variable number of battles you can fight on this section. And it's kind of random, so you don't always fight the same number of battles. I think you can get through as few as 1 battle if things line up properly. The weirdest thing about the Ocean Palace is that if you've played through and beat Chrono Trigger before, you'll know that the Ocean Palace eventually rises up into the sky to become the Black Omen, which is the sort of like essentially the game's last final dungeon. It's optional, technically, but it is the game's final dungeon. But it also looks completely different, which is kind of weird. The layout's different. The whole design looks different as well. This is the worst battle. Essentially, I have to now just take these out one at a time with single target magic spells. Otherwise, you just go through a period of them just you getting hit with 4 and then 2 area of effect spells, and it doesn't do much damage, but it takes a lot of time. Lightning, fire. Oh, no, that's fine. So I do these streams on my lunch break. Normally I'd be wrapping up right about now, but we're getting pretty close to the end of the Black Omen, which is also marks kind of the end of like the game's first half, or the end of the second act, I guess. Narratively, it's the end of the second act, and also the game's big twist. So we're going to push through until we get there, and that will mark an excellent stopping point. This is one of the other room that I just left with the big lava pit is one of my favorites in the game for the reason that I kind of mentioned earlier, that on CRT, your old tube TV, or I grew up playing games on a Commodore 1702 monitor. Just the vibrancy of the that glowy lava stuff. I don't even know if it's lava, but just the way it pops on a CRT. With the lit phosphors is just beautiful. I just recently upgraded from a 1080p LCD flat panel TV to a 4K with HDR, which I wasn't really all that. I didn't really care too much about it. It just was incidentally had HDR, so I've been learning about that technology, and it kind of reminds me of what you could get from phosphor glow on a CRT, where you actually the brighter the pixel, the whiter the pixel, the brighter it was, and you'd have pixel bleed over scan lines and stuff like that, and you could essentially get a screen and that looked brighter where there was brighter content, like this big lit up lava field. And so that was kind of interesting, an interesting kind of revelation for me, that something that I appreciate so much about CRTs is sort of in a way being replicated on current technology finally. I was watching an episode of Digital Foundry, which is one of my favorite YouTube gaming channels, and they did an episode just about CRT technology, not for old games, but for new games, and they were looking at how a really high-end CRT monitor handled new games, including widescreen and everything, and they walked away very impressed, obviously, because the technology is amazing, and they kind of wondered why we got away from that, how, especially for high-end gaming and high-end enthusiast gaming, why we sort of all agreed to switch over to flat panels, especially because flat panel monitors were so bad when the technology first kind of became available to consumers. You go look at an old 4x3 or even a widescreen flat panel LCD monitor from 2005 or 2008 or whenever, and they're bad. They look really bad. And there's just so much that CRT monitors have to offer above and beyond what flat panels offer. And of course you couldn't get a 60-inch CRT, and nobody would have room or the capability to even have one of those in their house. So there are great reasons to have a big flat panel, and when you have stuff like OLED displays, and they're they're great black levels and colors and stuff there are great things about flat panels also, but CRTs offer a ton to gaming, not just in low latency, but in the lack of ghosting, and then in the lack of latency and all that kind of stuff. That it's just weird how we gave up on them as a technology for gaming. All right. So we managed to kind of interrupt the ceremony to waken Lavos, but everything's just a little bit too late. You can see the hooded character there, which we're going to find out very soon is somebody that we know. And now we're finding out that the ruby knife that we were given is actually the Masamune, the first form of the Masamune. And so as it absorbs the Mammon Machine's power, it transfers into the ruby knife and transforms it into the sword, the Masamune sword. That's kind of fun. And unfortunately, the sword's not strong enough to stop the Mammon Machine at this point, and so Lavos has been wakened. And this is what the Prophet in the hood has been trying to accomplish, because we find out momentarily that Prophet is our good friend Magus, the Dark Wizard from 600 AD, who is also Shala's younger brother, and Zeal's youngest son. Now, in a usual playthrough, this is a battle that you're supposed to lose. Lavos is majorly powered up, even compared to its endgame form, and you're just supposed to lose. At this point in the game, with my powered up characters, I could beat Lavos if I wanted to, and then you get you get a secret ending with the developer's room, I believe. For the purposes of this playthrough, though, I'm going to intentionally just die like the narrative wants me to, so that we can see the whole game. So there we go. And now for one of the kind of most impactful and iconic twists in, I think, not just sort of 16-bit Japanese RPGs, but just like the genre as a whole, is coming up. This part, I think everybody who's played Chrono Trigger remembers this exact moment. So Magus wants to fight Lavos and kill Lavos in revenge for his sister, who kind of gets sucked into the nethers of time because of all of this, which Magus helped foment. Like, if he hadn't gone back in time to try to stop it, it's the 12 Monkeys thing, right? If he hadn't gone back in time to try to save Shala and fight Lavos, then Lavos probably never would have been summoned. In which case, Shala never would have been sucked away into the dredges of time, in which case Magus never would have gone back in time to save her, and time paradox. I'm not going to try to explain it, but here we are. Magus is trying to defeat Lavos in revenge for his sister. Why he doesn't just, take his sister into a time portal and whisk her off to, 1000 AD or something, is another question. So here we go. Everybody's been knocked out, even Magus, who, narratively is meant to be extremely strong. Chrono gets up and selflessly sort of throws himself in the path of Lavos' attack, absorbs it all, and sacrifices himself. And I think that scene right there of Chrono just sort of disintegrating in the face of Lavos' attack is just seared into my memory. And again, I talked earlier in this episode about how, like, reaching Zeal and the whole kind of story in Zeal is sort of it for me. Like, it's the kind of moment of JRPG fandom for me that just defines kind of my experience as a fan, and that sacrifice of Chrono is one of the big reasons why. So we are now in a Japanese RPG without a main character, right? And that's pretty remarkable. So Shala uses the last of her power to send Magus and Luca and Marl off to safety. And then she eventually gets kind of thrown into an stasis and, you know, outside of time. Magus is always on the hunt for her, but can't find her, and that becomes the plot of Chrono Cross in the strangest way. And we do eventually find out what happens to Shala if you accept Chrono Cross as canon, which I know is divisive. And with the destruction of the Mammon Machine and the Ocean Palace, Lavos' energy kind of gets released and takes down Zeal. And so this is cool because not only do we come to a point where, you know, we have all these different time frames and eras in Chrono Trigger, but one of the major areas is about to undergo a huge transformation in terms of, you know, like what exists, the towns that exist, who is where, what the map looks like, which is pretty cool. Obviously kind of sits hand in hand with Final Fantasy VI and its big twist. Though maybe not quite at that same scale. It's a big tidal wave. A very big tidal wave. Okay, so now we wake up, and we are back in 12,000 BC down in the Earthbound village. And we were found by the Elder, and our time machine is also outside. So after the Ocean Palace disaster happened, Zeal fell from the sky, the tidal wave knocked out, washed away a lot of the land that was left. So there's a lot less... everything's ocean, except for basically this one Earthbound village. And so no one's seen Shala, no one has seen Chrono, he's gone. The Epic has kind of followed us. And so now we have to kind of go figure out what happened and what we can do, what we could do next. So Chrono was holding on to that pendant when he faced Lavos, but somehow it survived and has been returned to Morrow now. And this is going to be a great place to stop. As you can see, we have no Chrono. We have no required party member anymore, so we kind of get to make our own party. And we're going to go with an all-women party when we come back and start playing again next time. So I record this Let's Play Chrono Trigger every Tuesday on my lunch break. And I'm going to write about it this week for my next issue of Astrolabe. You can find that at aiden.substack.com. You can subscribe for free. I'm going to talk about Chrono Trigger, my experience doing this Let's Play. And I also write about a lot of other retro Japanese RPGs. So if you enjoy this stream, check out my newsletter. You can also find an archive of past episodes on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/AidenMoher. And I hope you enjoy it. And I'll catch you next Tuesday. Okay. Bye, everyone.